Hey everyone, I'm Bryson Meyer. Today I'm going to be covering behaviorism in psychology. So first up, what is behaviorism? Well, behaviorism is a school of thought created by John B. Watson, who is the gentleman right there on the left, in the early 1900s. And what makes behaviorism interesting compared to other schools of thought is that where many other schools of thought believed that analysis of the mind could only be subjective, John B. Watson believed and wanted to come up with a way to do objective analysis of the mind. He didn't think that the mind was purely subjective. So that's what really differentiated behaviorism from a lot of other schools of thought. And the way he did this was by focusing on observable behaviors. So what makes behaviorism really interesting in the eyes of scientists was that in comparison to other schools of thought from the day, behaviorism focused on only things that were observable and repeatable and testable. So, as such, behaviorism was supported a lot more by scientists in comparison to other schools of thought. So, there are a lot of concepts that have come out of behaviorism, but probably the largest and most prevalent is classical conditioning. So, classical conditioning is a concept discovered by physiologist Ivan Pavlov, not a psychologist, actually a physiologist. And it's best explained by an experiment that he did, which you can see on the right. So the way that the experiment worked is that he would present food to a dog, and this dog would salivate whenever the food was present. And then he would ring a bell in front of the dog with no food. Obviously, the dog doesn't get any reaction, it's just a bell ringing. However, once he brought the two together, he would ring the bell when the food was present, and of course the dog would be salivating because the food was present. And once he did that enough, he could ring the bell and the dog would start salivating even though there was no food present. So the whole idea behind this is that you can condition people or animals to do some sort of action by putting it together with a stimulus, which in this case was the bell ringing. So because the dog has associated the food with the bell, when he hears the bell, he believes that there's food, and subconsciously he'll begin to salivate. So that's the entire idea behind classical conditioning. There's another really important concept introduced by B.F. Skinner within behaviorism, and that is the idea of reinforcement and punishment. And reinforcement and punishment is actually very simple. So the entire idea is to just reinforce positive behaviors and punish negative ones. This is also known as operant conditioning. So on the right here, you can see this little image. Will press lever for food. This is relevant because B.F. Skinner had an experiment where he would put a rat into a box, and in this box there would be a lever. When this rat pressed onto the lever, food would be dispensed. So the action that the rat is taking is pressing down on the lever. And in response, he gets food, which is a reward. Now, there have been variations of this experiment where maybe when he presses the lever, there'd be a punishment of some sort. But the idea is the rat is being reinforced to keep pressing the lever because he keeps getting the reward of the food. And you see this concept probably not even realizing that it's a psychological concept in the real world all the time. For example, if you're training a dog, let's say you're training a dog to take food out of your hand nice. If you give it food, if you give your dog food and it takes it in a mean way or bites you, then you can yell at them or put them in timeout or whatever, and that's negative reinforcement. It's telling the dog not to do that. But if the dog takes it nice, you call him a good boy, you pet him, whatever, you give him another treat, that reinforces the behavior of taking the food in a nice way, and that's the whole idea of positive and negative reinforcement. So while behaviorism was a really big deal back in the day, it's kind of fallen off a bit in terms of popularity. But that's just because there's a few problems with behaviorism in the eyes of psychologists. So the first is that behaviorism is often seen as is too rigid. It doesn't account for a lot of different things within the human mind, whether it be differences in attitude or behavior, and it can't really do too much given that it only focuses on observable behavior. Um, and as such, it doesn't really explain what's happening in the mind or why it's happening. It just explains that certain patterns can occur with the mind, that the mind can be manipulated in certain ways. So because of this, there have been more prevalent schools of thought when it comes to psychology since, but still it's very foundational, still used today, very important. So even though it's not quite as important or as prevalent and as popular as it was before, it's still a very big part of psychology. And here are my references. I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation.